Come on, let's go to our house. The long-awaited day of taking possession of our new home. My mother-in-law followed us around like she owned the place. Upon arriving, she uttered a surprising statement. I sold the house. Living in a high-rise apartment is going to be amazing. Her voice echoed through the apartment. John and I, who hadn't said a single word about living together, were speechless. She looked around the room excitedly. Despite my confusion, I managed to speak up. Actually. Hearing this, my mother-in-law turned pale and collapsed to her knees. My name is Alex Allen, I'm 30 years old. I loved my job and worked hard until this age. Telling myself I was better suited for work than romance, I spent my days focused on my career without much luck in love. Then John came into my life, soon to become my husband. John was 2 years younger than me, a contact at a client company. Always cheerful, John's presence was always lively. At first, I thought he was quite the flirt, but he was always kind to me. I found myself attracted to this gentleman before I knew it. Thinking of John made even the toughest work manageable. I began to want to date him. Having been unlucky in love and experienced painful relationships, John seemed like a real prince to me. Then, one day, I needed to call the client, and John answered. My voice was cracking, and my response made him laugh. Sorry, you're just so cute. Oh, my apologies. I couldn't believe my ears. John had called me cute. And then, he surprised me further by asking. If it's okay with you, Alex, would you like to go out to eat with me sometime? Caught off guard by John's sudden invitation, I replied, yes. I'd love to, my voice cracking again. John smiled happily. Then, we went out to eat countless times and had many dates. Each time, John made me laugh, and I spent some truly happy moments. And on Christmas night, John proposed to me, saying, will you marry me? I promise to make you happy, please. My answer was, of course, yes. And so, surrounded by everyone, we were able to have our wedding without a hitch. John's mom was very happy too, and I spent a dreamlike time, filled with happiness. Having been a workaholic, I quit the job I loved so much when I got married. I wanted to support John as his wife, and that desire was strong. With hopes high, we moved into our new apartment. Even after marriage, John was as kind as ever. He always put me first, and took the initiative to do household chores. I had no complaints, but there was one thing that worried me. It was about my mother-in-law. John's father had passed away from illness when he was young, and his mother had raised him alone. Because of that, money was tight back then, and John had to give up on college to start working right after high school. His mother lives alone while working part-time, but she can't work long hours because of her bad legs. For her sake, John sends her money every month. His mother always says, I'm always sorry, with gratitude. It's natural to support John's biological parent, but our life was so tight we couldn't afford any luxuries. John left the household finances to me, so I managed our life with strict budgeting. Although we were tight on money, every day with John was filled with happiness. However, something happened that would easily shatter this happiness. A year had passed since we got married. Today was the day we were finally going to see our dream home. My family's house was very old, built by my grandfather, and I often disliked it as a child, so owning my own home was a dream. We had been saving little by little for a dream home. My heart was pounding. That was when it happened. My mother-in-law entered our apartment without even ringing the doorbell. Oh no, Alex, you haven't prepared anything? I was too shocked to speak. Surprised, I stared at her as she, dressed in flashy clothes, excitedly said, I'm coming to see the property too. While I didn't mind her coming, I had hoped to thoroughly inspect it with John alone. I was dumbfounded when John whispered in my ear, I accidentally told Mom we were going to see the property today. Sorry. That explained it. However, getting advice from my experienced mother-in-law could be beneficial, a good opportunity. I tried to stay as positive as possible. Today, we planned to visit the model room of a new condominium. My mother-in-law, John, and I got into the car and headed to the model room. Upon arrival, she was the first to enter and inspect every corner of the room. Though not yet completed, it's supposed to be a 20-story high-rise. It would be the tallest building in the area upon completion, with a beautiful nighttime view, according to the agent. Hearing this, my mother-in-law got excited, suggesting, why not decide on this condo? A high-rise is every woman's dream, isn't it? Though the property was attractive, it felt too early to make a decision. Personally, I preferred a detached house. I wanted to take our time choosing our dream home, without rushing. We're not in a hurry, so let's look at various homes, not just this one. But my mother-in-law immediately countered. No, let's settle on this one. If we don't decide quickly, someone else will snatch it up. She seemed to really like the high-rise, but it's our home, so I wanted to choose carefully, and I didn't understand why she had to make the decision. Feeling a bit irritated by her tone, she then said something unbelievable. I'll live with you. I was momentarily stunned by her words. Surely, I had misheard. But her next words were even more shocking. It'll be fun to live together. I want a large room for my yoga and other activities. And then, let's put a big TV in the living room. She was all set on living with us. She must think John, being the kind-hearted person he is, wouldn't refuse. Despite not having agreed to live together, my mother-in-law excitedly went on with her plans. I don't dislike my mother-in-law, but I was against living together. What should I do? As I pondered this, I glanced at John, who looked bewildered at his mother. I tried to convey my feelings through eye contact to John. John seemed to get the message and told his mother, we can't decide on something so important right away, but she looked displeased. Do you not want to live with me? After all I've done raising you, that's just cruel. It's not like that. John said, looking guilty. I know raising a child alone isn't easy. And that's why John has been giving his mother money every month, as a token of our gratitude. But the thought of him agreeing to live with his mother just because she insisted scared me. As I nervously listened, my mother-in-law suddenly leaned in and asked. Alex, you're okay with living together, right? Caught off guard, I blurted out, what? That's. My mother-in-law didn't miss my reaction. Her attitude shifted as she glared at me. Alex, that's awful. You don't want to live with me. Not valuing your husband's mother, that's the lowest of the low. She scolded me loudly. I hadn't said anything about not valuing her, but she was being incredibly one-sided. Realizing how self-centered she could be was shocking. Anyone would be surprised if you suddenly brought up living together. Don't be so mad. John desperately tried to defend me. Yet, her anger didn't subside, and she didn't speak a word to me afterward. Shocked by upsetting her, I couldn't stop thinking about apologizing. So, I suggested we all go eat steak together on the way home. I hoped to improve her mood. My suggestion seemed to light up her eyes, as she loves steak. We immediately entered the steak restaurant. Hoping to use this opportunity to firmly refuse the cohabitation proposal, I let my mother-in-law order while John and I pretended to go to the restroom. Once out of her sight, I whispered, I'm sorry to say this, but I still want to live just with John. John nodded, agreeing with me. I feel the same way. I'll let Mom know gently, so don't worry. Relieved by John's reassuring words, we returned to our seats, where my mother-in-law greeted us cheerily. Oh, you took your time. I've already ordered. At that moment, I was genuinely relieved her mood had improved thanks to the steak, but I was shocked when the food arrived. In front of John and my mother-in-law were extravagant steak sets, but in front of me was just rice. I was too surprised to speak. I guessed this must be her revenge for refusing to live with her. Her obvious attempt to annoy me twisted my face. John, angered, told her, Mom. That's terrible, but she just laughed, saying, Alex said she liked rice, so I chose this for her. I had never said I liked rice. Yet, my mother-in-law lied with a straight face. I do like rice, so thank you. I managed to say while eating, shocked. John, sitting across from me, tried to give me some of his steak. But feeling sorry for him, I decided to stick with the rice. It was the first time I felt so miserable. I looked down, fighting back tears. Then John began to persuade his mother. "Mom, I'm sorry, but we really can't live together right now." She looked at John in surprise. "Why not? I get it. It's too sudden, isn't it? Take some more time to think it over." Shocked by her convenient interpretation, John was left speechless. I couldn't believe my mother-in-law could be so spiteful. This thought exhausted me, spinning in my head. Finally separating from my mother-in-law and returning to our apartment, I collapsed onto the bed and fell asleep from fatigue. From then on, my mother-in-law frequently visited our apartment without notice. And when she came over, she'd spread out interior design magazines, saying, "This furniture is lovely, isn't it? Let's buy it. I'll place the order." All John could say was, Mom, please stop." But nothing he said seemed to reach her anymore. Even though we hadn't decided on buying the high-rise yet, my mother-in-law's enthusiasm for it was far from cooling down, it was gradually heating up. Watching her, I was at a loss for what to do. John told me, since Dad passed away, Mom has lived without any luxuries. That's why I find it hard to be firm with her, sorry. She had struggled through life as a single parent, and now he wanted to repay her. It seemed I had no choice but to accept the situation. We didn't want to live with her, but John and I discussed other ways to show our filial piety. But even saying that, having her drop by our apartment unannounced was a nuisance. John and I were seriously thinking it was time to have a stern word with her. Then an incident happened. It was a Sunday. Neither John nor I are morning people, so we were taking it easy on our day off. It was when it happened. The home phone rang, and I answered it in place of still sleeping John, only to hear my mother-in-law's voice. She sounded excited about something. A bad feeling washed over me as she casually announced, "I've gone ahead and signed a contract for that high-rise, in John's name, for you too." Her words left me pale. "Excuse me?" I couldn't find the words. I couldn't believe she'd gone ahead and purchased a condo, and in John's name, no less. Our dream home was being decided by my mother-in-law without our consent. Sadness overwhelmed my anger, and I couldn't stop the tears. In a raised voice, I found myself saying, "Please don't do things on your own. John and I haven't even considered living with you yet. Choosing a new home is an important decision, and we want to take our time." But it was too late. My words triggered her anger. "Why would you say that? I did this for you. Besides, John is the one paying for it. You have no right to say anything." With that, she hung up forcefully. It was clear she hadn't signed the contract for our sake, but because she wanted to live there herself. I was utterly fed up with her. I immediately woke John up to tell him that his mother had gone ahead and signed a contract for the high-rise on her own. Even John was taken aback by this news. Suddenly, I felt a strong dizzy spell. I nearly collapsed, but John caught me just in time. "Alex! Are you okay? You don't look so good." Lately, I had been feeling under the weather. John, concerned, insisted we go to the hospital right away, so I rushed there the next day. The doctor told me something I never expected. I was pregnant, with a new life growing inside me. Now 3 months along, with a heartbeat already strong. I placed my hand on my stomach, feeling a surge of love for the baby. I immediately shared the news with John. That night, when his mother came over unannounced again, we decided to tell her about the pregnancy, but unlike John, she did not take the news well. "If the baby is born, there will be no room for me." I was dumbfounded by her words. She really only thinks about herself. No one had said anything about living together yet, but she was ready to blame the baby, which made me furious. Tears involuntarily spilled from my eyes. Seeing this, John raised his voice. "Mom, we're not going to live together. How many times do we have to say it?" Her response was to play the martyr, "So you can't live with an old hag like me? After your father passed, I raised you with hardly any money, and your father's small inheritance is gone. How am I supposed to live? John knew she had struggled to raise him alone. And she knew mentioning this made him speechless. She was cunning. She looked clearly inconvenienced. Then, a notification arrived on her smartphone. John's uncle, her brother-in-law, had passed away. She looked clearly inconvenienced. There's going to be a funeral. My legs are bad, I can't go. I was hoping you two could attend on my behalf. My mother-in-law claims she doesn't need to attend and that there's no need for us to go, but that's not really an option. The funeral is tomorrow. Since John can't go because of work, I'll be going in his place. When I told her, my mother-in-law looked pleased. The next day, dressed in funeral attire, I entered the funeral hall and noticed a man in his 50s staring at me. Who could he be? As I wondered, he approached and started a conversation. Nice to meet you. I'm John's father's brother. You must be John's wife, right? I recognized you from photos I've seen. The man smiled kindly at me. Nice to meet you. Now that you mention it, you do resemble the photos of John's father I've seen. Hearing my words, the man seemed pleased and shared stories from the past. John's father, my brother, was truly a family-oriented and kind man. He always thought about John, and I respected him for that. As he reminisced, he shared various stories. It allowed me to catch a glimpse of how much John's late father cared for him, warming my heart. However, it was then I learned a certain truth. On the day the high-rise was to be handed over, my mother-in-law showed up at our apartment with a load of boxes. We didn't want to tell her the move-in date, but after persistent questioning, it seems John let it slip. Come on, you two need to help with the luggage, she said, pointing to a taxi. Continuing in a good mood, she added, Let's go. To our new home. John looked at me worriedly, but my mother-in-law had already made herself comfortable in our car. My mother-in-law, this is really troubling. I protested, but she wasn't listening. It was time for a last resort. That's when I decided it was time to deal with this monster-in-law. Arriving at the high-rise, John was exasperated as his mother rushed into the apartment first. She spread her arms wide and sniffed around the room. Seeing this, John tried to say something to his mother, but she was too busy exploring on her own. Then, entering what she had claimed as her room, the master bedroom, she screamed. Yikes! This is supposed to be my room. Why are there children's things here? The room was filled with kids' toys and a bed. When I blurted out to my mother-in-law, You have your own home, don't you? She laughed and shockingly revealed. I sold the house. Living in a high-rise like this is going to be amazing. She casually mentioned selling the house that my father-in-law had cherished. John and I could only stare at her in disbelief as she looked triumphant. I sighed in frustration. This place is for my friend, you know? All these children's toys and furniture belong to my friend. What? But I signed the contract under John's name? My mother-in-law looked incredulous but soon grasped the situation. Lively voices were heard from the entrance. As the friend couple entered the room, they exclaimed, Wow! Just as I thought, it's a lovely place. Alex, thank you so much for introducing us to this wonderful place, and squeezed my hand in gratitude. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law glared at me with a demonic expression. Alex! What is the meaning of this? Pulling an agitated and angry mother-in-law aside, John and I stepped outside. There, I decided to tell her the truth. After she had impulsively signed for the high-rise, I hurriedly had John cancel it. It turns out she had forged John's identification and power of attorney to deceive the agent. We quickly explained the situation and managed to cancel the contract in no time. Then, by introducing the high-rise to a friend who was eager to move in, we negotiated a deal to overlook my mother-in-law's blunder. The friends instantly fell in love with the high-rise and signed the contract immediately. Although the high-rise was attractive, we thought raising our child in a more relaxed countryside setting would be better. John happily agreed with this idea. Today was supposed to be a celebration of our friend's move-in, something they were aware we were coming for. Explaining this made my mother-in-law exclaim, So the baby is more important than me. I've always put John first in my life, but this is just too much," and she broke down in tears. The friend family looked on worriedly, wondering what was happening. Seeing John feeling sorry for his mother, I instinctively felt the need to expose her true nature, and with a cool gaze, I asked, "Is that really true?" Everyone turned to look at me in surprise. As my mother-in-law glared at me, she retorted, "Why do I have to be lectured by someone who knows nothing?" John looked at me with a puzzled expression. Quietly, I pulled out a piece of paper from my pocket and showed it to my mother-in-law. "This letter was carefully kept by your brother-in-law. What is this about? Isn't there a substantial amount of inheritance from your husband, so much so that living with us isn't necessary?" John was surprised as he read the contents of the letter. It detailed the various inheritances left by his father. Not just money, but stocks and land, everything. "Mom, what is all this about?" My mother-in-law was flustered. John, completely unaware of the vast inheritance left by his father, seemed shocked. Indeed, at his uncle's funeral, his father's brother had handed me the paper. "This was entrusted to me by my brother. It lists all the inheritance he left behind. I think Isabella also has a copy of this." His father had been a successful business owner, apparently having plenty of money. He had prepared a significant inheritance. Always he put his family first. Sweating, my mother-in-law stammered, "Such an inheritance. I knew nothing about it." "That's nonsense." I had had enough of her endless lies. "It's impossible you didn't know. We checked, and all the savings left by your husband were withdrawn under your name. And the land he left? Sold under your name and gone." John was astonished by my words. Still, my mother-in-law insisted, "I don't know what I don't know. You're just trying to get back at me because I've been mean to you, right? This treatment is terrible." She wanted to portray me as lying to everyone, refusing to admit her own mistakes. I couldn't let her get away with this any longer. Despite thinking that it might be useless to say anything to this person, I decided to expose my mother-in-law's final secret. "There's more, isn't there? While receiving money from John every month, you're also getting more than enough to live on from your brother-in-law, aren't you?" My words only added to my mother-in-law's dismay. She couldn't even look at me, let alone respond. At the funeral, I learned that she was also receiving regular deposits from her late husband's brother. He had taken over the company his brother built. And feeling sorry for the widowed mother-in-law, was sending her more than enough money each month. Despite the regular deposits, he had not heard from her and was worried about how she was doing. Learning the truth left me astonished. Despite having a lot of money, my mother-in-law was still accepting money from John. The survivor's pension, the substantial inheritance left by his father, combined with the money John was giving her monthly, she could have lived a life of luxury. "That's nonsense. John, you can't believe what this person says," she retorted, even at this point. Then, it happened. "What are you talking about? It's a fact that I pity you for losing your husband, my brother, and have been transferring money to you every month," exclaimed John's uncle, entering the room with a raised voice. My mother-in-law was taken aback by his appearance. "Why are you here? Unrelated old men should not butt into the conversation," she rudely said. She rudely said. I told her, I invited him here for this discussion. He came despite being busy, so please stop being disrespectful. Plus, it's rude to behave like that when you're receiving money from him every month. I felt like no amount of logical argument would get through to my habitually lying mother-in-law. So I had decided to invite John's uncle, a third party, to lend credibility to the situation. I had given John's uncle the address of the high-rise when my mother-in-law packed up her belongings and showed up at our apartment. I anticipated this. My mother-in-law, blinking in disbelief at his words, watched as John's uncle could no longer contain his anger. "Listening to you is nothing but lies. My brother left his estate for you and John. He confirmed the estate with you before he died." Faced with the furious uncle, my mother-in-law could only look down, unable to say a word. Next to me, John was shaking. "I gave up going to the college I wanted for a family that had no money. Even now, I'm sending money to my mom every month. The inheritance from Dad is still there, right? John, usually mild-mannered, was now red with anger. In stark contrast, my mother-in-law turned pale and looked at John. Then, in a panicked voice, she revealed something shocking. The estate from Dad, it's all gone. John and I were dumbfounded. According to the document left by his father, the inheritance seemed to be worth well over $5 million. She nonchalantly admitted to spending all of it. John asked, trembling, "You're lying, right? What did you spend Dad's vast inheritance on?" To which she replied in a barely audible voice, "Jewelry and clothes." It seemed that my mother-in-law had squandered the precious inheritance left by John's father entirely on herself. I could only stare at my mother-in-law in shock and anger, unable to speak. John sighed heavily and said, "I can't believe it. You used Dad's precious money for such things. And you never gave me a penny. John, there's a reason for this. Please, listen to my side of the story." My mother-in-law pleaded, grabbing John's arm, but he looked at her with cold eyes. "To waste the inheritance Dad left for us on frivolous things, I'm so disappointed. The money I sent every month, you must have wasted that too, right? Please, just leave me out of your life." John pulled me away, trying to leave, but my mother-in-law followed, apologizing. "John, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. You're all I have." John continued walking, ignoring her. John's uncle, witnessing this, said, "John is right. It's unbelievable you used the important inheritance just for your desires. I will stop the monthly transfers immediately. If not, my brother in heaven won't be at peace." "No, no." My mother-in-law collapsed to her knees, crying. But no one attempted to help her. I apologized to our friends for causing a scene and left with John. John and I headed to our new home in the car, coincidentally moving on the same day as our friend's condo handover. John's mood was somber because of his mother. I held his hand, trying to comfort him. "I always wanted to make Mom's life easier, thinking she struggled to raise me, but to secretly spend all of Dad's inheritance like that is just too cruel." Driving, I could tell John was deeply hurt. It's no wonder John felt this way. His mother, who he thought had no money, lived luxuriously without spending a dime on him. Thinking about John's feelings made my heart ache. An hour into the ride, we arrived at our new home, where we would start living today. Contrasting the high-rise, a second-hand property. It was free from tall buildings around, with little traffic. John and I decided on this building instantly when we saw it. For today's handover, it was remodeled to my liking, looking so new you wouldn't think it's a second-hand property. We thought it was a place where we could raise our children freely. John took a deep breath and said, "Alex, let's build a very happy family from now on," as he hugged me close. I nodded in agreement. Afterward, John cut ties with his mother, who he had cherished, stopping the monthly money transfers. Despite struggling to find a new place, losing her last resort left her in a panic. She came to us, begging for money on her knees, but we naturally turned her away. She later managed to get into a dilapidated apartment, rumored to be demolished soon, barely a temporary fix. John's uncle also stopped the transfers after my mother-in-law repeatedly asked John for money, but he never gave in. Hearing from John, she took on more part-time work due to financial struggles, eventually resorting to payday loans. Whatever happens to my mother-in-law now is none of our concern. I hope she lives modestly without causing trouble for others. Yosef won't stop crying. In a panic, John handed our son Yosef to me. Yosef stopped crying the moment I held him. It reassured John. "You worry too much, John," I said with a laugh, looking at him making a silly face. After the incident, I gave birth to a healthy boy we named Yosef. The most adorable and beloved child in the world. John adores Yosef, sharing the same sentiment. "Well, I'm off then. Take care. Be safe." John started working at a new company. Coincidentally, his father's company, now run by his uncle as the president. His unmarried uncle had pleaded with John to take over the business, marking the beginning. Initially confused, John decided to join after hearing his uncle's strong wish. Now, he goes to work every day, looking forward to becoming a respectable president like his father. I will continue to support John and build a happy family together.